And welcome back to Teaching Statistical Thinking. Today we'll be going back into the Joey Votto game log to look at an example of univariate or one variable graphics. We'll look at plate appearances, a numerical variable, and game type, a nominal or categorical variable. In JUMP, the terms nominal and categorical are interchangeable. These variables can also sometimes be known as qualitative data, whereas numerical variables are also known as quantitative data. As a self-proclaimed Cincinnati Reds superfan, I'm really interested in knowing what the distribution of teams the Reds had to play in 2013 was. Additionally, I think it's really interesting to see how many plate appearances Joey Votto usually had in each game. We'll see if we can detect any patterns. So let's begin. On JUMP, we're going to go to Analyze, Distribution, and first we're going to do the simpler categorical variable of game type. We're going to click it, say Y column, and say OK. And to make it easier to visualize, we're going to click on this red triangle here and say stack. So now it's horizontal. So this is a bar chart that shows the relative frequency of each of the following game types the Reds played in. From the information on the frequency summaries here, we see that the Reds played 20 games against American League teams, 76 games against teams in their own division, and 66 games against other teams in the National League for a total of 162 games. These percentages here show the relative frequency of each of the games. So this tells us that the Reds played American League teams about 12% of the time, teams in their own division 47% of the time, and other teams in the National League about 41% of the time. So now that we have the simple categorical or nominal variable out of the way, let's go back and look at the continuous example of plate appearances. So we're going to go back, Analyze, Distribution. This time we're going to select plate appearances and put that in the Y column. Click OK. And once again, we're going to stack it. So although this can look like an intimidating amount of information, it's actually pretty straightforward. Before we even look at the right side quantiles, let's ignore this part for now and just look at the graph. Each number shows the relative frequency of each of the following outcomes in the game. Remember, there are 162 games, so all of these are slices out of 162. And for example, just looking at the chart, we see that the most common outcome was 4 plate appearances. So that would be the mode. And as a quick note, you might see in the background, whenever you select a certain outcome, for example, let's say we want to select the bar of 7 plate appearances, we can isolate which game this happened in by simply clicking on the bar and then going back to the main data set, and you'll see when this happened. So we see that Joey Votto had 7 plate appearances on April 20th. He also had 7 plate appearances on June 13th, September 4th, and September 18th. So that's a simple way that you can isolate specific games of interest just by clicking on the bar that represents that outcome. Now looking at this box and whisker plot above, this box here shows us the interquartile range. That is, the line from the 25th percentile to the 75th percentile, the middle 50% of the data. We see that the bottom 25% quartile is at 4, whereas the 75th percentile, or 75th percent quartile, is at 5. So this means our interquartile range, or the distance between the 25th quartile and the 75th quartile, is 1. The whiskers extend to 3 and a 6. And these points that are not within the whiskers are known as outliers. These are game events that had extremely rare outcomes. And we see that they're outliers at 7 and at 1 and 2. Now looking at our summary statistics and quantiles information. When looking at quantiles, the most obvious and basic way to start is usually at the median, and that's the point where half of the data falls above the point and half falls below. So we see that the median is at 4, just as the mode was. By looking at either the quantiles or the graph, we can see that the maximum, or the highest data point, is at 7, and the minimum is at 1. For example, let's look at the 90th percentile. This means that 90% of the data falls below that point and 10% falls above. This point is at 5. Likewise, we can look at the 10th percentile. 90% of the data falls above this point and only 10% falls below. The 10th percentile is at 4. Now looking at summary statistics, we see that the mean, which is the arithmetic average, is all the total number of play appearances he had all season divided by how many games, which n equals 162. This equals 4.48. Additionally, we see the standard deviation is about 0.81. This means for any given game, the average number of plate appearances that Joey Votto had was about 0.81 units away from the mean of 4.48. Although the unit of standard deviation doesn't make much sense now, it'll become very important later as we move on in descriptive statistics and eventually to inferential statistics. And for now, we can ignore these next 3 rows because they don't really concern us right now. And we do know what n means. That means how many games there are in the dataset, and that's 162. And that's it. Even though the variables we looked at were relatively straightforward, we were still able to procure an impressive amount of information from these 2 variables. The next video will discuss how to describe the relationship between 2 nominal or categorical variables using both graphics and number summaries. Thank you for watching.